The late 90s saw the rise of Pokemania, and its bright and colourful designs and captivating creatures made it a hit with kids, with parents and guardians more than happy to let them lose themselves in this world of imagination. Of course, there's always been pushback to the series from various groups that claim it promotes animal cruelty and even occultism. Naturally, that's a silly notion, but that's not to say that there isn't murkiness lurking under the surface of this mega franchise. I'm Cy for WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 terrifying secrets hidden in Pokemon games. Number 10. Phoebe's ghostly grandmother. There's a lot of questions to be asked about life after death in this world, considering Pokemon has an entire type of monsters that are ghost type. The games also, if investigated, feature several ghost type people as well. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, Phoebe is the Elite Four's resident ghost specialist. Apparently, this doesn't just stop at her preferred Pokemon type, but she has a powerful connection with all kinds of spirits. During the conversation with her before battle, it's possible to very briefly spot a female figure on a seat nearby. We get an odd point of view shot from this ghostly being's eyes, and then, almost totally obscured because of the camera view, she lurks ominously behind the player. Phoebe makes mention of training on Mount Pyre, which itself has a connection to the afterlife. In the original games, the player meets an elderly married couple there. In the remakes, only the old man is present. However, very few players will return here after beating the Delta episode post-game, and if they do, they'll find Phoebe laughing and joking with no one else around. If the correct dialogue options are picked, Phoebe will imply that she is talking with her deceased grandmother, presumably the lady from the original game and the spectator from your earlier battle. Chilling. Number 9. Pokemon Kidnappers. The two little lines of text that pop up on the Pokédex when you catch a Pokemon to tell you about it can be endearing, interesting, or in all too many cases, terrifying. However, whilst there are tons of Pokédex entries that are scary or bizarre alone, stacking several particular ones up against each other is incredibly worrying. For example, it's a wonder there are any children left to go out on these Pokemon adventures, considering how many Pokemon like to steal them away from their families. In Generation 1, we had Hypno that, as the name suggests, uses its psychic powers to hypnotize younglings to make them easy to kidnap. Drifloon appears to be a cute balloon, but will happily fly away with children who hold on too tight. Frillish doesn't target kids specifically, but they will sting their captives to subdue them and then drag them down to the ocean floor without much regard for their age. Duskull's whole evolutionary line is next level. Duskull is like some twisted Pokemon Krampus that takes away bad children and can pass through any surface to get to them. Its evolution Dusclops is said to have what amounts to a black hole in its chest that nothing can escape from. And finally, there are tales of Dusk Noir taking spirits to other worlds. And people would like Pokemon to be real? No thank you. Number 8. The Ruins of Alph and the Mysteries of the Universe. The unknown aren't necessarily scary, but they are perhaps a little unnerving. Their design, flat bodies with a single eye, is odd, but it prompts a major question. Did they take their forms based on the Latin alphabet, or do they predate it? There are very limited hard facts when it comes to their backstory, but it does imply that they have existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The unknown make their home in Johto's Ruins of Alph, and players of Gold and Silver can simply catch every form as a fairly straightforward aside. However, in the Heart Gold and Soul Silver remakes, taking an Arceus to the location triggers a shocking event. The player is teleported to the Sinjo Ruins, where a scene plays out unlike anything else in the series. After a swarm of unknown apparates, we peer into what appears to be the beginning of the universe and the advancement of technology, all shown with real-life photographs. It's incredibly bizarre and out of place. Arceus is treated as a sort of god of the Pokemon universe, but the unknown's connection to this is still never explained. More than anything, the scene is an uncomfortable contrast next to the game's cartoony visuals. I came here to battle monsters and win badges, not ponder life, the universe, and everything. Number 7. Shedinja will steal your soul. The catchphrase once upon a time might have been gotta catch 'em all, but in truth it's really more catch whatever you like. With over 1,000 Pokemon now, it's best to adopt what interests you most, rather than fill your PC boxes with endless stuff you won't use. There is one Pokemon, however, that might appear whether you want it to or not. Training your Nincada to level 20 will cause it to evolve into Ninjask, an awesome and super fast new ally. However, quite unexpectedly, if you have a space in your party and a spare Pokeball, you'll be joined by something else. The shell that this cicada has broken out from gains sentience and joins your team like an uninvited guest. First-time players wouldn't even necessarily know this right away, as there's no prompt for it just appears. That is creepy enough to get a space on this list, but it gets worse. Since there's no prompt, you'll have to seek out its Pokédex entries. Not only does Shedinja not move, its wings don't even flap, it apparently doesn't breathe. Furthermore, looking into the open hole in the back of this sentient carcass is said to steal your spirit. Which, by the way, it will bear to you if you send it out in battle, of course. Thanks, Shedinja. Number 6. The Alolan Trainor School Mystery. Trainor School schools are a common part of the Pokemon series as they act as a good way to introduce mechanics to new players. If you're a long-time trainer, you can breeze right by, but those that are still to learn the importance of type matchups, abilities, and status effects can go on in and be taught all of the game's basics. However, the school in Ultra Sun and Moon Alola's region holds a dark secret. When visited at night, the player will come across a small girl and a Drifloon. She speaks of 7 mysteries to solve, each one with a creepy, disjointed piece of intro text, such as an alley behind the school that emits the smell of burning and the sounds of crying. However, most of these turn out to be easily explained, such as by a jilted teenage girl burning the letters to her former crush. When 6 of these are completed, the girl will explain that she has come from far away and is still struggling with Alola's language. Then the player will be interrupted by a security guard and will turn back to their new friend to find that the girl has mysteriously vanished. Furthermore, the guard says he didn't see anyone else there. Because if ghosts aren't scary enough as is, make them children. Number 5. Pokemon are humans? In the Canalave Library in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, there's a book that talks about the long-standing relationship between humans and Pokemon. It implies that both used to be on a more equal footing, and even goes so far in the Japanese version to say that there were marriages between the two. This is of course quite alarming, but there is an interesting overlap between this and certain Pokédex entries that tell us some Pokemon started out as humans. In Emerald, we got a little more insight into the origin of Kadabra, which tells us it was once a young boy who was assisting research into psychic abilities and was overwhelmed by the power. Generation 4's Yamask is a shadow holding a death mask, an ancient practice of making a cast from the face of a recently deceased person. It's literally holding its own face, which it will apparently sometimes look at and cry. That's as horrifying as it is depressing. Sword and Shield's Pokédex entries give us both sides of Phantump's coin, and they're as dark as each other. Not only is this Pokemon the spirit of a lost child possessed by a tree stump, but it leads other children into the forest, presumably to suffer the same fate. So some Pokemon were humans. Makes you think about how uncanny figures like Mr. Mime came into existence. Actually, I don't want to know. Number 4. Pokemon breeding dynamics. This is less scary in a spooky or mysterious sense and more terrifyingly impractical. Not just battling and training, players can also become Pokemon breeders. When the daycare grew in Gold and Silver to contain the ability to leave 2 Pokemon and potentially come back to an egg, Game Freak had to figure out how to come up with some kind of algorithm for it. That is to say, what determines the appearance of an egg at the daycare center. Shooting for a straightforward option, they created 14 different egg groups, and species in each group could only breed with Pokemon in the same group. However, whilst 14 seems like a lot, it's more about type and shape: bug, aquatic, mineral, human-like, monsters, and so on. It doesn't take into account things like size and physiology. The field group, as nondescript as that is, features some really weird possible pairings, such as the 47-foot-long Wailord breeding with the 8-inch tall Diglett. Not only does that hurt one's brain to consider the physical nature of that breeding session, but furthermore, it's one of the few ways Wailord can learn the devastating OHKO move Fissure, so it's actually well worth it. Sorry, Diglett. Also, Charizard and Magikarp can breed. Just putting it out there for the extra weird. Number 3. Guzzlord is a Lovecraftian nightmare. Some Pokemon trainers retire from their journeys after defeating the Elite Four, and with how divisive they are, nobody can really blame players for abandoning Sun and Moon at this point. Ergo, a lot of people never really dug into that generation's post-game optional content. If you thought Pokemon that are upset spirits or haunted bug carapaces were bad, it's about to go to a whole other level. The big hook of this goes further than Pokemon has ever gone before, looking at invading species from a different dimension. These Ultra Beasts are cosmic Pokemon from an unknowable universe, bleeding through into our own through wormholes. The concept of that is bad enough, but the big boss of the bunch is perhaps the worst, and very clearly a Lovecraftian nightmare in its own right. Guzzlord by name and by nature, this 18-foot tall Maw devours worlds without causing any waste, acting like a gigantic living black hole. That is quite literally the definition of cosmic horror, and you, as the player, have come so far now that you must face down this monstrosity and either defeat it or put it in a tiny sphere and keep it. Good luck. Number 2. Killing your rival's Raticate. A list about the darkness in Pokemon is not complete without Lavender Town. This spooky village features the Pokemon Tower, a large building that acts as a graveyard for dead Pokemon. This entry is the closest we'll get to fan theory on this list, but it's so popular and so worryingly plausible that it deserves a mention. Before arriving in Lavender Town, the protagonist finds themselves aboard the cruise liner SS Anne and gets into one of many scraps with their rival. The player wins, departs the ship, and the next time they see Blue/Gary/Butthead or whatever you named him, it's a chance encounter at Pokemon Tower. His first reaction is to ask why you're here at this place of mourning because your Pokemon, and I quote, don't look dead. But why Why is your rival here? Well, that Raticate is suddenly missing from his party, which has led many fans to take it as fact that the injuries sustained from the previous battle were too great, and the distance from the SS Ant's upper deck to the Pokemon Center too far, and that your rival has come here to lay it to rest. It's not confirmed, but it seems entirely possible, and if so, you owe Butthead a sincere apology. And number 1, Lumio City's Hex Maniac. As we've established, not content with just ghost Pokemon, there are a lot of ghost humans throughout the series. It's not necessary to list them all, but a special shout out needs to be given to perhaps the creepiest of them all. Graveyards, scary towers and schools in the dead of night are somewhat more acceptable locations to encounter supernatural beings, which is what makes Lumio City's Hex Maniac all the weirder. This city is the game's stand-in for Paris, a big, beautiful, well-lit place that has a ghost in a very inconspicuous office block. If the player finds themselves on the second floor, the music of the game will suddenly stop as they leave the elevator. The lights dim and a Hex Maniac trainer will appear behind them, slide along the floor unsettlingly and say, "No, you're not the one," before gliding off screen. Players tried all kinds of experiments to try to understand this and cooked up plenty of theories, but she never appears anywhere else and it's not explained at all. It has no impact on the game, which somehow makes it all the scarier. In all likelihood, this was Game Freak's own reaction to the trend in Pokemon creepypastas appearing online, but it doesn't stop it from being unnerving in its own right. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments below. Which of these terrifying secrets creeped you out the most? And of course, let us know of any others in the Pokemon franchise. There are plenty more. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Don't forget to head over to WhatCulture.com for more content every day. I've been Cy for WhatCulture, and have a good week.